So at this point, the floor is open for questions. Bam, right off rip.
This question is for the gentleman in the middle, Sean. Your poetry makes me think very deeply about things, maybe more deeply than I thought about things before. But also I wondered, with working in Milwaukee like I do and singing as part of this May addressing, when you talk about heartbreak, is seeing the loss of youth and senseless gang shootings, where children are just in their homes on the porches, regardless of race or anything, being shot down. I'm just wondering, do you have any poetry in terms of that, and you know, what we as a whole society can try to do to stem some of that, regardless of where people come from?
I would say, as of right now in this moment, I do not necessarily have poetry that addresses, I guess, loss of life due to gang violence, mostly because it's not, well, two reasons. One, it's not necessarily my immediate experience, and then also the pieces that I read tonight having to do with police brutality were reactionary either to things that I lived through or things happening around me. The Tony Robinson shooting was actually just 6 blocks away from my house. So that was one of the pieces I read tonight came immediately out of that time period. I do think that that's something that should be addressed, and I think that it's addressed in a multitude of people's works in many different ways. I also think that it's different from the type of violence that I'm communicating, telling stories about.
Because we're all coming at it from a different perspective. We all have our own individual worldview and perception.
Yeah.
And our own blinders, we all have one. And sometimes it's hard to see outside of those. But sometimes when I like I said, working in Milwaukee like I do, and I see a 5-year-old, a 12-year-old, you never know what their promise could have been. And you speak of heartbreak. You can't die of heartbreak, but yeah, you can. When you see that happening, and you just sometimes feel so helpless it's happening. That's literally how I feel. It's like you feel, how do you handle the police violence? I feel like, how do we handle the rest of this? It feels like there's never going to be an answer to it. And it's going to go on, whether it's the police, as you talked about in yours, or whether it's the gangs going on. And it's not just here, it's all over the country. And it feels very heartbreaking and very helpless. And
Let's make sure that we're asking questions.
I am trying to get that.
Sure.
That's just why his poetry moved me so much. It was very powerful to me. Like I said, what he was talking about made me think about things a lot. And that's why I was just kind of curious if it was just that work or if he'd done other work, or if that was just his individual experience. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, well, I'll just add one thing. The violence that I'm trying to broadcast and bring attention to is something that I think is more large scale and institutional. I think, or more so I know, that violence perpetrated by police officers in communities of color is something that can be traced back to slave patrols, right? If you think about like slave patrols in the 1700s, that's really like America's like first police force, right? So kind of like the violence against the black and brown body by state officials is something that is an ill of this country. And today we are in a moment where we have the ability, because of phones and Facebook and all these things that we've built to communicate, to use those same things to communicate issues that need, in my opinion, most of our attention. I say that just to, again, like, kind of clarify that I hear you and that I feel you, and that I just like to keep the conversations.
It was very powerful.
Thank you.
That was very powerful. I'm done.
Other questions?
Quick question for the three of you. Whatever order you get, choose to answer it, and I appreciate it. In this moment, your greatest inspiration.
You must have asked. You know, we're like a full rabbit.
Okay.
It's okay to say my name. It's all right.
Secondary's Nick. You know, there's a lot. For me, it's not that we really have to stop and think. We shouldn't have to stop and think for an answer to a question like that. But sometimes it's hard to like rein it in. It's almost like asking, can you name what's your biggest blessing right now?
Right.
It's like you can think of so many that can encompass the blessings. It's hard to choose just one. But I would say, if I had to take it back, it would be my grandmother. I think my grandmother is my greatest inspiration, especially since she has late-stage dementia, and she's not the same person at times that she was before, but she is the same person that she was before, if you get my drift. So just to know, like, she was the storyteller, her own life was so inspirational, and so when I find myself struggling, when I find myself at a brick wall, when I think about somebody who succeeded despite the odds, I think of my grandmother. So that helps me in day-to-day life. But then as far as writing is concerned, she is one of my inspirations to be able to voice what I feel.
Okay. Well, Misty said her grandmother, so that makes me feel like my response is a little bit inappropriate. But I'm just going to be 100% honest with you all right now. My biggest inspiration right now in this moment is Kanye West. And usually I have to defend and explain this because the majority of America doesn't like Kanye West. So this is what I'm going to say. Kanye, I don't know Kanye. But from what I have observed of his music and his public persona, Kanye West literally does not think, which is a blessing and a curse. So the first idea he gets in his mind, he just does it. And I admire that so much. Because if I could do that, I think I would be a much better artist. Maybe not the best person. But I don't know him really, so I can't speak on that.
Was your grandma Kanye West?
Taking that question immediately. I just told. I had to think about this. I still don't have a good answer. In terms of person-to-person contact, it would be people who have believed in me along the way. I'm an immigrant, the son of a hairdresser. My dad was a security guard. What am I doing writing poetry? People who have believed in me along the way. Some of them have passed, some of them are still alive. I'm still in contact with some of them. In terms of writing, the American poet William Stafford, of course, Carl Dennis, who is still kicking. But if you were to press me against the wall and say, okay, one person and that's it, then I'll just stand against that wall and cry. But then I'll give you two names. The modern Greek poet Kavafi and the German poet Rilke.
So I've been reading debates all week about Beyonce and Kendrick Lamar performances and Super Bowl appearances respectively, and their impact on pop and how they were into politics currently. And I want to know what y'all think about Beyonce's or Kendrick's performance, whether you think they're good or, because the thing about Beyonce, people consider her being capitalist or whatever, but there's value to. Just tell me your thoughts.
I want to go back to one too, and I know it sounds like basic maybe, compared to the wonderful poets that you mentioned that are amazing. But as I was thinking, I like went down to like childhood and had a second grade teacher who would read Shel Silverstein. And like I think that maybe besides my own family, my mom, you know, my parents both being educators and promoting literacy and all of that, I'd have to say that second grade teacher who read Shel Silverstein every week, and how much I love Light in the Attic and over the sidewalk and so yeah, there's tons of inspiration. And you're saying I'm like Shel Silverstein, and okay, okay, if I get it right, you want to know about how we feel about the political involvement of a entertainment, the Beyonce. Are you talking about the Beyonce halftime show? Okay, all right. I did not see the Beyonce halftime show, but I heard about it and I did look into it a little bit. And I feel like, much like poets, artists have their own opinion and their own way of expressing things. And so I do think that maybe she, in that performance and the idea behind that song that I think you're referring to, is probably like a way of expressing herself. And I feel like, at that point, you can choose to agree and side and say and go for it, or you can disagree. But in the end, basically, I guess freedom of expression. And I guess good halftime show. She can dance.
What y'all thought of it, either performance, and if you thought it nicely reflected the climate, political climate of,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, I do think that it's much like poetry or other ways of expressing yourself or performance, and that, dance and singing and many types of poetry are ways of expressing themselves. And I couldn't really weigh in on it as far as how I feel it affects the political situation, but I know it does. How do you feel about it?
Wait a minute, I'm just going to derail that right here. We're doing a lot of talking over here, not quite as much as I'd like to see over here. These people have visited, so I want to focus on what they have to say about things.
I think that's a great question. I actually had this conversation in one of my classes yesterday. I feel like Beyonce and Kendrick Lamar are doing the best that they possibly could, considering their positions as entertainers, American entertainers, without losing all of their credibility. I feel like as a pop star, and this is in reference to Beyonce, it's kind of difficult for her to be too political, because then she's not going to be a pop star. So for her to do that at the halftime show, I really respected it, although I recognize that in the cultural moment that we live in, Black Lives Matter is like one of the most talked about things, and Beyonce's target audience, whether they agree with Black Lives Matter or not, they've probably all seen it or heard about it via the internet or what's happening on their college campuses or in their hometowns. So I think it's a little bit of a double-sided move for Beyonce. I think it's a good move in terms of the capitalists, because the song's going to do well. And then also, it's a mess, but at the same time, it is a message that's important. So in that way, I think you could take it for what it is. And as far as Kendrick Lamar, I've never seen a Grammy performance like the one that he put on, which is really invigorating and makes me feel happy to see someone at the Grammys at an institution that has never once ever given a black artist #1 best album of the year or even best song of the year. They gave it to Stevie Wonder like after he had Stevie Wonder maybe like Ray Charles. Ray Charles, yeah. They gave it to Ray Charles after. I'm sorry. They gave it to Ray Charles after he had passed. So I guess you can count that. I don't count that because he had passed. So yeah, for Kendrick to do that and to just go up there and be, for lack of a better term, like pretty unapologetically black, I think it was really awesome. And I don't know, I can only hope that he, probably pissed off a few people.
I think the last song of Beyonce's I heard and saw was Single Ladies. So I'm not
Can you
familiar.
speak on that a little bit?
So I'm not familiar with this show that you're talking about. I did not see Kendrick Lamar's performance. But if we're trying to talk about the role of the artist in society,
Right.
I think that for many artists, their work carries a social justice dimension.
Right.
And I think it should. It should. Why? Because we need artists to remind us who our best selves can be still.
Thank you.
Gina, I saw that you had a question right there.
So for you two on the lab, I myself do presentations every once in a while. So, well, my lab, I guess. So your memorization skills, I give you both credit for that. He had actually called you out on that too. And it was just like, I cannot do that to save my life. Like you did like 5, 6 of them in a row practically, and I'm just like back here like, whoa. Like, did you like use it or something? Like, it must just be like mindset.
It's just really practice, repetition. I think. I mean, to be clear, like I was reading off of my phone. It wasn't like just like. It would have been a very different thing if I had had like all 7 of those poems memorized. But yeah, it's just practice, discipline, really. Like just there's this term called getting the poem in your body, right? Which is like you repeat the poem to a point where you could say it slow, you could say it fast, you could say it while you're washing the dishes, you could say it jumping up and down. And then once you get a poem in your body like that, then like you've really reached like what another term, which is like that's when you can really start like performing it, right? Because before that you're kind of just reading lines in your head. You know what I mean? And then once it's really in your body, that's when you can do new and exciting things with performance. So it's not easy per se. All you have to do is set aside time.
I concur. There are a couple poets that I really admire. One I've never met, but I still I like his stuff. Taylor Mali. He's an English teacher and a poet, and his stuff is amazing. And he does something, I believe it's through him, called Page Meets Stage, where it kind of takes that poem that maybe you've written and kind of turns it more into a performance piece, and that does, like Sean was saying, take practice, as well as a poet that came to the school I go to now. His name is Joaquin Suatanejo, and he gave some really good tips about practicing, and his poetry is amazing if you get a chance to look at him up too. And every day in the living room with a friend, somebody who you'd like to bounce something off of. For me, the car and the shower. Same place that I sing. And I, like Sean was saying too, like trying to get it away from less tangible and more tangible at the same time. I guess just move it from the page to someplace else, and then practice a lot. That helps. And then I think too, the more passionate you are about the piece, the more that you can really relate to it, then the more easy it is to remember because it's a part of you. So that's how I feel. All right.
Well, let's do this. Okay, we'll do two more here. Let's start.
Thanks
with
for
this.
being interested in asking your questions.
This is an
Great,
easy one,
thank
because
you.
I can't write for anything. But what do you guys do when you get writer's block? You just don't know where to start. What do you guys do?
Who wants to start?
Why don't we just have, is yours for all three people also?
It is.
All right, why don't we have one person answer that one, and then we'll have like two answer the next one.
Okay, writer's
Someone
block.
with a brilliant answer.
Okay, writer's block. One is taking the time.
Right.
Sometimes like life just happens and I feel like I have writer's block, but it's because I'm just not being still and quiet enough to really think.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things, like once I can do that, then that eliminates a lot. Not trying so hard to get it out, but just being inspired by different moments. I woke up the other day and I have written, but not, maybe it's been a couple months or something like that, and the birds were singing outside, and I was like, I have to write about this right now. It's just what I think, what's in the moment, and then listening to other people too. It's not that you're listening to what they're saying, but sometimes their passion can be contagious, and then it makes you kind of, if you were thinking about music, it puts that underbelly, that tone, that like beat, and then you just got to fill in the words, you know? So I think it's one, listening to other people, and taking the time out just to.
I'm glad you guys got it, because I should.
Take some time out. Take some time out. Like like you were saying, silence. Your question, please.
Yeah, my question is, what do you enjoy more, performing pieces or writing them?
I have a mic. Okay, well that's a complex question.
It is.
I don't think I can necessarily say I enjoy one more than the other. I think performing is more immediate. I get more of an immediate satisfaction because it's like I'm like here and there's like presumably an audience. And I can like, you know, like it's a different feeling to say something than to write it. But writing is very satisfactory as well, especially finishing a poem or whatever it is the satisfactory part for me. Because then once I've finished it, I can look back at it and be like, wow, I did all of this. Time to get rid of it all and do it again.
I think that the reading of a poem for me is an opportunity for the poem to come alive again. So even if I haven't seen the poem for a while, the poem just begins to raise its face again. I get to know the poem again, and it's just so it's a good feeling, right? But the writing process is something that I've really come to love. So even when I don't know where I'm going, you know, I'm not so conditioned to be looking 10 steps ahead for the final product. Wherever I am is wherever I am, and I've come to really, really enjoy that.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
If you're not on the Bonk email listserv, talk to me and I'll put you on that. Over here, there are Bonk t-shirts. Over here, there are Buy Those books. Buy them all! And last but not least, thank you to all of you for coming out, and thank you to these guys for blessing us.